So it looks like the far left are at it again, trying to basically make excuses for their, let's just say, disgusting protests. Let's run the intro. So welcome back to Street Switch Photography for this live on, well, nearly 5 to 1 on this Friday. I thought I'd do this. I've just been onto Nova Media on YouTube and I found a video that I think is going to be quite interesting for everybody to see. Them making excuses for Palestine Action, basically a prescribed terrorist organisation in Great Britain. A guy at a university has been threatened to be sent back to his own country. Let's watch and see what they actually say, because I think this is it's quite not just sort of weird. I wouldn't say weird per se, but this is what should be happening with all people that go to these Palestine events. Let's have a look.
A Novara Media exclusive has found that a prestigious Russell Group university, King's College London, has indefinitely suspended a student for pro-Palestine activism on campus after pressure from a pro-Israel lobby group. An indefinite suspension means the student in question, a 21-year-old Osama Ghanem, will have his visa withdrawn and be sent back to his home country of Egypt.
Good.
Crucially, King's College London were aware that Osama and his immediate family members had previously been imprisoned and tortured in Egypt for speaking out against the regime.
Let's listen.
The university also knew that Osama had a diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder due to his treatment in Egypt, and that he was...
Haven't they all got post-traumatic stress disorder? But he's well enough to go out protesting about anti-Semitism and everything else, saying, from the river to the sea, let's call for global intifada. And then all of a sudden he's got post-traumatic stress syndrome.
Risk of further
mistreatment if
he was sent back there.
I mean, him. That's a bloke. Silly man.
Osama is now taking King's College London to court for alleged breaches of his human rights, assault and personal injury, discrimination and harassment. King's College London told Novara Media that it is inaccurate to suggest that an investigation commenced after a single complaint. A KCL spokesperson...
He's been on multiple Palestine protests. I've seen him. In Manchester, in Leeds.
Also said this. The university is committed to upholding and protecting freedom of expression and the right to protest within the law, and we take proportionate action when behaviour breaches our policies decided upon...
So he was saying anti-Semitic stuff, which most of Palestine Action was. They hate the Jewish people.
Through our robust processes and procedures. Earlier today, I spoke to Novara Media's own Harriet Williamson about her exclusive. I started by asking Harriet if KCL were engaging in deliberate endangerment.
Yeah, it certainly looks like it. And King's College London's decision to indefinitely suspend Osama certainly has endangered him, whether deliberately or not, I couldn't say. But Osama was in a uniquely vulnerable position as an international student from overseas. He has obviously, as many international students do, given a great deal of money to the university in order to be able to study there, or taken on a great deal of debt for the future to be able to get a degree from such a prestigious institution. And if this was a...
So let's look at it like this. He's entered this country to go to university. His parents have obviously got money. He's entered this university. Somebody's been up to him, brainwashed him, sent him on a Palestine Action protest, and Flaming now is sitting complaining about it because they don't want him protesting. He's there to learn. Now, I agree with free speech, but listen to what she says.
British resident student we were talking about who had received an indefinite suspension. Yes, it's an incredibly harsh sanction, but they would go they would go back to their home.
If you think that's a harsh sanction, after two Jewish men were basically disgustingly murdered in Manchester, then there's something wrong with you. There's something seriously wrong.
In the UK, Osama in this case will have his student visa withdrawn and he will have to go back to Egypt, where he, his brother and his father...
Fucking didums. Boo-hoo. That's the smallest violin in the world. Don't go on Palestine protests shouting anti-Semitic chants, calling for global intifada from the river to the sea.
Father, who sadly is no longer alive, were all imprisoned and tortured for speaking out against the Egyptian regime. Osama said to Novara Media that he knows what it's like to live in authoritarian societies. He lived in both
What, like here in Britain?
Egypt and Saudi Arabia, and he compared the actions of King's College London to those authoritarian regimes, and he said that the best...
He's so oppressed. Fucking hell, he's so oppressed living his champagne socialist life. He's such an oppressed individual.
behaviour of King's was straight out of the Trump playbook. So Osama was vulnerable because of where he was from and as an international student. King's knew that. Osama wrote openly in his statement to King's when he applied to the international relations clause, saying that his father and brother had been tortured in Egypt and that he himself taken part in a great deal of sort of political activism.
I don't call it political activism, I call it racism towards the Jewish people, but hey-ho, you might have a different opinion on it.
Political documentary making, and that he wanted to get a political education in order to make the world a better place. They didn't think that
if you think communism, Marxism, socialism is making the world a better place, you are severely... You were kicked in the head as a child or something, I don't know.
Osama was this sort of wilting, wallflower, apolitical student who wouldn't get involved in campus activism. And they also knew that Osama had a PTSD diagnosis from the really, really shocking and violent treatment that he'd been...
Where did he receive his PTSD diagnosis? That's what I'd like to know.
...subjected to by the Egyptian authorities.
He'll have a crutch next.
So, yeah, deliberate endangerment from where I'm standing.
No, he's brought this on himself by going on these Palestine Action protests, who are a prescribed terrorist organisation in Great Britain after 2 men were murdered and they decided to enter an RAF base and put paint into the engines of some of the planes, causing millions of pounds worth of damage. That's the truth. Stop bullshitting, say it as it is.
It doesn't look like Kings have behaved in the best interests of their own students. I think a criticism of Kings could be here that they have actually behaved in...
I mean, do you think his mum and dad paid for him to go to college to go on these Palestine protests, or to actually get an education so he can get a job and stop flaming, you know, sort of sponging off his mum and dad? Because his mum and dad are probably sort of champagne socialists as well. They're probably Islamists like him. He's been brainwashed
the pro-Israel lobby
by the university
the students that come to their own institutions to learn, like Osama.
Can you expand upon the role of the pro-Israel lobby in this story?
So the part of this story that actually feels really egregious is that...
Egregious? Oh, it feels really egregious, does it?
Osama was sanctioned...
How many times do you think they're going to mention genocide in Gaza and all this lot when there actually hasn't been any genocides in Gaza? They were simply protecting themselves because of October the 7th.
3 times for pro-Palestine activism on campus. The first one...
Terrorist activism. Let's say what it exactly is. It's terrorist activism. What do you think's going to happen? If a university think they have a terrorist on their... actually in their university, then I just come on in, you're all right, sit down, come and learn something, you know, get real.
One was for protesting the King's Alumni Awards ceremony, and that was in the summer of last year, of 2024, and for that he was excluded from campus under emergency powers. He was also excluded from campus under emergency powers again for protesting the London Defence Conference in the spring of this year, 2025. And those events were far higher profile than the event that he protested in February of this year that actually got him the most serious sanction, which is the indefinite suspension.
I don't think he should ever be allowed to go back there either. I think he should be deported, along with the rest of them. If they're that bothered about Palestine, get a plane ticket, go over there and actually do something. The only thing I can say, you know, credit where credit is due, at least Greta Thunberg's actually tried, even though she's made a complete and utter moron of herself because she's a virtue signalling little troll.
That one was quite a small panel discussion between 2 people. It's about Iranian-Israeli relations, and it was held in like a standard-sized lecture theatre and only attended by about 40 people. Like, it wasn't particularly high profile. It had a fairly controversial speaker. It was a pro-Israel Iranian policy researcher whose social media is quite presence is quite contentious in like how much she supports Netanyahu.
Nice to know you became a critic, love.
I've spoken to the people who are part of the Iranian diaspora in this country, and they say that her views are quite fringe. This was a small event. Some students protested. The two people on the panel walked out of the room very...
The thing is, students aren't really there to protest, are they? They're there to get an education. That is what you'd have thought the parents would have wanted them to be doing. Now, when you see these Islamist protests, because I'm going to call it for what exactly it is, they're all wearing masks. They get masked up. They wear something called a kafir, which is what Hamas wear when they committed the atrocities on October the 7th. It makes people feel very uncomfortable. It makes especially Jewish people feel extremely uncomfortable when they're screaming from the river to the sea and calling for global intifada, and she sits there and moans because he's now got to go back to where he came from. What a load of crap.
Quickly, they did not engage
One
with protesters.
person.
Security came into the room. The event was cancelled in about 25 minutes. There was some chanting. Everyone went home. That's as far as we know it.
Anti-Semitic chants.
But Campaign Against Anti-Semitism wrote a letter following this event.
Don't you agree with Campaign Against Anti-Semitism? Because I certainly do.
To the leadership of King's College London.
Are they actually just about to admit that they're anti-Semitic because they're disagreeing with the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism?
And that letter was seen by Novara Media. Campaign Against Anti-Semitism called the incident to be investigated and for the university to take action against the students involved.
Rightfully so. Rightfully so. If there's anti-Semitism on campus, you need to nip it in the bud there and then. So they did the right thing. And this person here is just about to basically disagree with it, proving that they are anti-Semitic.
This feels like pressure, it feels like interference, and what we know about campaigning...
Oh, how dare they interfere with your anti-Semitism, with your racism? How dare they interfere with that? How disgusting. Yet you interfere with everything that's happening in Israel and Gaza. Yet you don't even live there. You see what I mean? This is the far left for you. This is how brainwashed they actually are. Yet again, proving my point, debunked in minutes.
Gideon Faulkner, who in April last year attempted to spark some sort of confrontation at a national march in solidarity with...
Right, before we say anything more, we've allowed these protests to go on for 2.5 years. 2.5 years. Manchester, Leeds, London, all around the country. There's been these pro-Palestine marches. And there's been what you call counter-protests, because in this country we have something called democracy and free speech. And they say that they're there to sort of antagonise the people that are flaming protesting for pro-Palestine. Yet what we get when we get people outside these migrant hotels and things like that, let me just click over to me, we get these people outside the migrant hotels waving the British flag, basically saying we do not want migrants here, and then we get a load of them turn up antagonising. But the only difference is the police will escort them into these places, and then they will give them minibuses back to the train station, like in Epping. There's video evidence of this all over YouTube. Everything this woman is saying on this video is complete and utter propaganda, and it's bullshit. That is how they work.
People of Palestine, while they're suffering a genocide at the hands of Israel.
No, they're not suffering a genocide at the hands of Israel. They are now. Basically, Donald Trump went in and did a peace deal. And guess what happened? Guess what actually happened? The peace was going on for around 2 days. And then Hamas attacked Israel again and started executing people in the fucking street. And she has the audacity to sit there and the brass bloody neck to sit there and still blame Israel for it after her anti-Semitic chants that she does when she goes to these Palestine protests. There's a reason that they're a prescribed terrorist organisation, Hamas and Palestine Action. It's disgusting, this channel.
And Faulkner put out a bit of a misleading video saying that he hadn't been...
No, it wasn't a misleading video. It was a video telling the truth. Just because you didn't understand it does not make it misleading.
...allowed to walk through the march because he was wearing a kippah, a Jewish skull cap.
He was wearing a kippah. So if he's not allowed to walk around being openly Jewish, as you like to describe it.
And he looked openly Jewish. Now, that interaction with a Met officer was actually found to be part of a much longer conversation that they had, where Faulkner seemed like he really wanted to be there to cause a bit of trouble. And
He was there to prove a point, to prove that you guys are so anti-Semitic and so vile that people want to vomit in their own mouth and swallow it when they're stood next to you because you stink.
The stance from the police when these great big marches for Palestine happens is that counter-protesters aren't supposed to be mixed in with protesters.
Does that sound familiar? Does that sound familiar? Anytime Great Britain have a protest, so let's just say, for example, the Tommy Robinson protest, that it was only 150,000 people turned up to more like 3 million. Where was the Palestine protesters causing the trouble to try and make it look like it was Tommy Robinson's lot? Now proven fact. 28 police officers harmed by pro-Palestine protesters. No hardly any violence from Tommy Robinson's lot. Which is the most violent side, the left or the right? You tell me, because I'm telling you now, there are no terrorist organisations on the far right. They haven't been prescribed a terrorist organisation, yet we've had the Charlie Kirk killing, we've had 2 assassination attempts on Donald Trump, and I keep saying this, and people need to hear it, and people need to start debunking shitty channels like this that spread bullshit and propaganda. And I'm going to continue to do it, whether people like it or not.
They're supposed to be kept separate, and that was why this Met officer wasn't particularly sure about Gideon Faulkner being able to just walk through the March for Palestine. And he sort of made it seem like, in fact, he very much did make it seem like Jewish people would not be welcome in the national...
That's because they're not, because you're screaming from the river to the sea. You're calling for global intifada. How does that make a Jewish person feel welcome, especially when they're being, openly Jewish? Let's be totally honest about it. You can't just sit there and try and make shit up to try and make what you're doing okay. It does not work like that. If you're going to go out chanting that sort of bullshit, at least understand what it actually means. The next word that comes out of our mouth will probably be something along the words of Zionist, racist or fascist.
National March for Palestine, which is absolutely not true, and we know this because every time there is one...
From the river to the sea, what does it actually mean? Global Intifada, what does it actually mean? They never tell you this, what it actually means, and all it takes is a quick Google and you will see that they are the 2 most anti-Semitic chants you can get. And you're telling me that 2 Jewish people that were murdered would have felt really comfortable over there in their synagogue in Manchester when these people are walking through the centre of Manchester screaming this sort of shit?
In this very large Jewish block, there are people in Orthodox Jewish dress, plenty of people wearing skull caps. Some of them are knitted to resemble watermelons, which is a symbol of Palestinian solidarity. And if you go on one of these marches, you will...
So in other words, the traitors.
...be walking side by side with your Jewish brothers and sisters who don't...
Let's have some statistics and let's find out where you get your statistics from. Usually Hamas, because they can be trusted, can't they? They said they were going to have this peace deal with Donald Trump and then decided to start executing people in the street and then started attacking Israel yet again, then started doing their virtue signalling yet again. How many times is this going to happen before people pull their head out of their arse and start realising that these protests, we don't need them anymore? These are just people that are evil. They are evil far left arseholes.
Believe that the people in Gaza should be bombed, starved, or have crimes against humanity committed against them.
They don't believe that at all. They think that they should be taken away from Hamas so they can live a normal life. They don't believe Hamas should be in control, a terrorist organisation in control of Gaza and Palestine. That is what they believe, so don't tell them what they do and do not believe.
By the state of Israel. And, people like Gideon Faulkner, who leads the campaign against anti-Semitism, and, this is an organisation that has been called overly politicised. It says it's a charity, but
overly politicised, said the people that go out on the streets every single week for the past 2.5 years with Palestine protest flags, or should I say terrorist flags, chanting disgusting things.
It gets involved in political matters. It's vexatious. It feels... This action of Gideon Faulkner's last year, it feels really misleading and about stoking fear within the Jewish community rather than keeping them...
Right, I'll say it one more time. 2 Jewish men were murdered by a jihadi in Manchester at a synagogue just over a month ago. So how can she sit there and actually say this and expect people to believe it? unless you're a brainwashed sheep.
Safer in Britain. These are the pro-Israel organisations that are interfering in British public life.
Oh, how dare they interfere in British public life in a British country where British people live? How dare they?
I think that is what this story, that's something that this story really pulls out for us, is that these lobbying organisations...
As far as I'm concerned, he should leave this country, and I hope the door doesn't hit his backside on the way out.
Have a great deal of power in that they can put pressure on institutions and
rightfully
sort of
so
get what they want out of it.
Good.
Kings, of course, says that it would be inaccurate to suggest that after one complaint this decision was made.
Well, how about this then? How about he doesn't go on these Palestine marches and actually concentrates on his education that the Champagne Socialist parents have actually paid for? How about that? That might be a good idea. Then he wouldn't be in trouble. If you don't do the crime, you won't do the time, will you? Now he's just got himself hopefully deported. So there you go. That's what happens if you walk down the street shouting anti-Semitic, racist, fascist comments towards people that have done absolutely but nothing but live peacefully in this country for years and years and years. Been here a lot longer than what he has. The little scrote, I bet his balls ain't even dropped.
But I think people can draw their own conclusions over whether there was influence.
We already have.
And when it comes to King's College London, you said
Nigel.
That one of their conflicts of interest.
All right, Nige. Game of darts later, mate.
Here is the investments, the endowments they have that are related to Israel. Can you tell us more about those?
According to the King's College London BDS forum, King's has about 20 million invested in companies complicit in Israeli apartheid, surveillance and illegal...
They love that word, apartheid. There is no apartheid. Only people calling people Zionists and calling them flaming from the river to the sea and calling for global intifada. And also chanting, go and shoot yourself like Hitler did, to people walking down the street minding their own business. These are the types of people that are running this channel and at the universities in Manchester and all over the country.
And a lot of these companies are the ones that were name-checked in Francesca Albanese's UN report about companies who have actually profited from the machinery of genocide since October.
There's been no genocide.
2023. Now,
Since
King
October
says
what? Let's see what she says.
Machinery of genocide since October 2023.
Since October 2023. Do you mean October the 7th, when Hamas from Gaza and Palestine went in and murdered thousands of people? That was a genocide. That was the genocide, not what's happening in Gaza. Israel have a right to protect themselves. So yet more propaganda and more bullshit.
Now, King says it's got an ethical investment policy. But a lot of places say that, and I'm not sure in a lot of cases it actually means that much. And as of last summer, in a win for the King's Gaza Solidarity encampment on campus, King said it would no longer be investing in companies that make controversial weapons. Now, in this instance, controversial weapons means things like cluster bombs, landmine, depleted uranium weapons, and chemical and biological weapons. It doesn't mean the regular weapons that have been widely used in Israel's genocide of the Palestinians.
Israel's protecting itself against terrorists. That's what she meant to say there.
Palestinian people in Gaza, which has gone on for 2 years now, and a fragile ceasefire is, just about staying together, even though Israel continues to violate it loads of times. But
Israel could... What? Did I hear that right? Israel keep violating it.
Just about staying together, even though Israel continues to violate it loads of times.
Loads of times. Well, the peace deal was made by Donald Trump. Donald Trump has now turned around and said to Hamas, if you do not disarm, we will come in and disarm you. This is to Palestine and Hamas and Gaza. Israel, again, are protecting themselves because Hamas are killing people in the streets. Execution style. There's videos all over YouTube about it, all over Facebook, all over X. This woman is nuts.
But apparently that's not real violations of the ceasefire because it's Israel doing it.
Wow.
But yeah, King says it's got this ethical...
Oh yeah, but yeah. What, because it's a lie.
...investment policy, but it's still invests in companies that make conventional weapons. And this is a key point because it is the conventional weapons.
Now, the conventional weapons that she's talking about here in Great Britain that we supply to Israel are buttons. with a spring underneath that actually, for the missile buttons, we provide the plastic top for the button. And it's something like 0.1% of the arms that they actually receive from the rest of the world.
That have killed,
because they're incapable of making their own.
A conservative estimate of 68,000 people in Gaza over the last 2 years.
According to Hamas, they can really be trusted with those figures, can't they? Considering they're the ones that put these people into schools and into hospitals after Israel have dropped thousands upon thousands of leaflets to tell them to get out of that part of Palestine or Gaza, because we're going to be dropping bombs in there in the next couple of days so nobody gets harmed, and sending in the IDF. So Hamas round them all up, put them in the hospitals because they know that's where they've built the tunnels underneath, and they put them in the schools where they've got missile silos and things like this and other weapons, and then use these people as human shields. That's what she's talking about. Well, trying to talk about, but disguise it as something else.
It's not these controversial weapons, really.
Any weapon's controversial, you silly cow.
It's a conventional weapon. It's not a controversial one. And I think that one thing about this story that I'd really like to pull out for our viewers here is that...
Try pulling your head out your arse and opening your eyes and actually smelling the coffee and see what's actually happening around you. You silly little child.
Students have historically been incredibly sort of active and vocal for a lot of progressive causes. Students often have very strong moral compasses because they kind of have less to lose in that.
Because they've been brainwashed, that's why.
They don't have like...
A lot of these people on these Palestine Action at protests turn out to be teachers or teachers' helpers and things like that, or NHS workers and all this sort of shit.
A career or a mortgage yet. They're getting all sorts of ideas at uni that they're exploring. They tend to be quite like politically radical and idealistic. So it's not...
They're there to learn. They're there to get an education, not to walk down the street shouting anti-Semitic Nazi chants towards Jewish people.
Surprise to anybody that students feel really strongly about what Israel's been doing in Gaza over the last 2 years.
And what about what Gaza have been doing in Israel? In Israel, Muslims and Jewish people live together peacefully and have done for hundreds of years. It just seems to be that the ones in Palestine, Hamas and Gaza, don't want that at all. They just do not want peace. They want to destroy. That is what they do.
And for decades,
they've been offered multiple peace deals and they will not take it. So they've only got themselves to blame. They are brilliant at virtue signalling and lying, these people are.
But what perhaps is a bit of a surprise is that the unis themselves seem kind of shocked by it, and they kind of don't know how to react unless it's in a really authoritarian way. And that's
by not making anti-Semitic chants would be a good start, wouldn't it?
What we've seen from King's. Like King's revised the rules on campus protests to outlaw any protest they assess to be intentionally causing an intimidating environment, and that was after the campus.
From the river to the sea, calling for global intifada. Very intimidating towards Jewish people after 2 were murdered in Manchester about a month ago or 3 weeks ago by a jihadi. And do you know what his name was? Get this. The bloke's actual name was Jihadi. You couldn't write this shit, could you?
They rewrote their rules. And who is assessing whether something is creating an intimidating environment? Who is assessing whether a protest is disruptive or not? A protest that's disruptive, I wager, is a protest that isn't really working. Now, you've got King's in this case actually paying a private investigation company called B360 to look into Osama and compile an 18-page report on his activity.
Good.
And, this is before he says he was even...
You see, this is basically what's been happening to Tommy Robinson. He's been arrested for no reason for doing something called journalism and having free speech. And they love that. They love it when he gets arrested because these are connected to something called hope not hate, and they have an unhealthy obsession with Tommy Robinson. But when it happens to them, to one of their people in a university, oh no. Free speech isn't so good then, is it? When it doesn't match their prerogative, they want nothing to do with it.
Has to give his side of things, and the use of emergency powers against him. I think that Kings comes off as incredibly authoritarian here and not really being bothered about the well-being of the.
I think the people doing these Palestine Action come across as terrorists because they're a prescribed terrorist organisation. But hey-ho, who am I to speak about that, eh?
Of students like Osama, when we think about the information that they had about him and about the risks to him if his student visa was withdrawn and he would have.
Do you think he gave a shit about the risks to the Israeli people when Hamas went in and started butchering everybody? Women and men, children, families, in front of their own family. Do you think, I mean, come on.
Egypt. And the fact that they rejected his appeal against the indefinite suspension anyway.
That was Novara's Harriet Williamson speaking to me earlier today.
Nigel.
Her exclusive article will be linked for you down there in the description.
Thank you, Nigel.
I highly, highly, highly recommend you go and read it. It's a very important story, that one.
Cheers, Nigel. Now, again, as I said before, this is a far-left channel. This is a far-left channel for the simple reason they are all for these Palestine Action marches in London, in Leeds, in Manchester and everything that have been causing so many problems. And after what happened in Manchester with the 2 Jewish gentlemen that got murdered by a jihadi, his name was Jihadi, they still think that it's basically okay to go out and actually protest and celebrate the murder of these 2 people. Celebrate it. Now, I'm going to continue to do these debunks on this channel because I find it extremely easy to debunk for a start, and I'm in search of the truth, not lies and propaganda. This has been Street Switch Photography. If you like this video, like and subscribe. Go and hit the notification bell, leave a comment, give me a big thumbs up or a big thumbs down, and I'll hopefully see you in the next video. Run the outro.
Do just what I do, and I hope you let me in, yeah.